From the chilling sight of a lamprey pie to the unsettling experience of dining on ox tongue, a dish that left no doubt about its origins, and even to the gruesome preparation of boiled sheep's brain, here are 20 brutal photos of meals from 200 years ago. Number 20. Lampre Pie. Lampre pie stands out as one of the more brutal dishes from 200 years ago, not just because of its unusual ingredients, but due to the way it was prepared. Lampreys, which resemble eels, were often caught and cooked alive, a practice that would likely horrify many today. After being cleaned, these jawless fish were stewed in a rich spiced wine sauce with flavors like cinnamon and nutmeg, masking the strong taste of the fish. The idea of consuming a creature so unique and eerie might send a chill down your spine, especially knowing the methods used to bring this dish to the table. Despite its gruesome origins, lamprey pie was a delicacy reserved for the elite, particularly enjoyed by kings and nobles who saw it as a symbol of luxury. But what about it made it so appealing back then? The blend of exotic spices and the ritualistic preparation likely added to its allure, even if the process seems harsh by today's standards. The thought of serving a pie made from a fish that was often cooked alive gives us a glimpse into the brutal reality of historical culinary practices. Number 19. Potted Pigeon.
This is a great place to start. I mean, this is wood pigeon, great meat.
Potted pigeon has a rich history rooted in 18th and 19th century British cuisine, reflecting the practical needs and culinary practices of the time. In an era before refrigeration, preserving meat was a challenge, and potted pigeon was a clever solution. This dish involved cooking pigeons, often roasting them to enhance their flavor, then packing the meat into pots or jars with a layer of fat on top. This fat acted as a seal, preventing air from reaching the meat and thus extending its shelf life. The method of potting meat was especially useful during the winter months or periods of food scarcity when fresh meat was harder to come by. Pigeons, being abundant and relatively easy to raise, were a common choice for this preservation technique. The process was labor-intensive, but essential in ensuring a steady supply of protein during times when food preservation was crucial for survival. Potted pigeon was enjoyed by both the wealthy and the working class, demonstrating its versatility and practicality. It was often served as a savory spread or a main dish, valued for its rich, gamey flavor. Over time, as food preservation methods improved and refrigeration became more widespread, dishes like potted pigeon fell out of favor. Number 18. Stuffed calf's heart. Stuffed calf's heart is a dish with roots in traditional European cuisine, particularly in regions where resourcefulness was key to survival. Dating back hundreds of years, this dish was born out of necessity when people made use of every part of the animal to ensure nothing went to waste. In many rural areas, where fresh meat was a luxury and every meal had to count, organs like the heart were considered valuable sources of nutrition. The practice of stuffing a heart likely emerged as a way to enhance the flavor and texture of what might otherwise be considered a tough or unappealing cut of meat. Historically, the heart was cleaned thoroughly, then filled with a savory mixture of breadcrumbs, herbs, spices, and sometimes additional meats or vegetables. This stuffing not only added flavor, but also made the dish more filling, stretching limited resources further. The stuffed heart was then roasted or braised, a process that tenderized the meat and allowed the flavors to meld together. Over time, stuffed calf's heart became more than just a practical meat. It was also served at special occasions and was appreciated for its rich, hearty taste. Our next dish might sound tasty, but it is as brutal as the dish at number 6. Number 17, ox tongue. Ox tongue might sound like a dish straight out of a horror story, but just 200 years ago, it was a common meal that many considered a delicacy. The thought of eating an animal's tongue might make you uneasy, but back then, it was a prized cut of meat, served in the homes of both the wealthy and the working class. What made this dish brutal wasn't the idea of eating tongue. It was the entire process involved. The tongue was often boiled whole, then skinned, and served either sliced cold or roasted with rich sauces. Preparing ox tongue required a level of detachment that today might seem unsettling, as the tongue still retained its shape, making it clear what part of the animal you were eating. Can you imagine what it would be like to sit down to a meal where the main course was staring right back at you? This dish was not just about nourishment, but also about using every part of the animal, a practice that was essential in a time when food waste was not an option. Despite its brutal nature, ox tongue was a regular part of the diet for many, showing how different our ancestors' approach to food was. Would you be able to stomach such a dish today? Or does the idea of eating a whole tongue seem too extreme? Well, the next dish can ask you the same. Number 16, roast squirrel.
Take him front feet off. Put him over there and the dog will eat him.
Roast squirrel was once a common meal for people living 200 years ago, particularly in areas where hunting was a way of life. This dish wasn't just a culinary choice, it was a necessity. Squirrels were easy to catch and provided a valuable source of meat, which made them a practical option for many households. But what makes roast squirrel particularly brutal is the process involved in preparing it. To serve a roast squirrel, it had to be skinned and cleaned thoroughly, which might seem harsh by today's standards. After that, it was seasoned with herbs and spices, then roasted to perfection. Can you picture preparing a meal from a small, agile animal that you might now see scampering through the park? This dish required a level of practicality and fortitude, as it involved using every part of the animal and facing the realities of food preservation head-on. Despite the brutality, roast squirrel was enjoyed for its rich flavor and was a vital part of the diet for many families. Number 15, blood pudding.
Rice, do not use black patty rice. If you don't know the difference between those two, just...
Blood pudding, also known as blood sausage, has a long history that dates back several centuries, with roots in various cultures around the world. Originating from medieval Europe, this dish was a practical solution to make use of every part of the animal and to provide a hearty, long-lasting food source. The process of making blood pudding involved collecting fresh blood from slaughtered animals and mixing it with grains, spices, and fat. The mixture was then stuffed into casings made from intestines and cooked, typically by boiling or steaming. The brutality of blood pudding lies in its preparation. The use of blood as a primary ingredient means that the process began with the killing of animals, a practice that might seem harsh by today's standards. The method of utilizing blood and other parts of the animal reflects a time when food waste was not an option, and every resource was stretched to its limit. The dish was particularly valued in rural communities, where meat was a precious commodity, and preserving it was crucial for survival. While it was an essential and practical meal for many, the idea of consuming blood pudding today might seem too extreme to some. It remains a testament to how culinary practices can reflect the needs and values of different historical periods. Number 14, jellied moose nose. Jellied moose nose is a dish with a unique history rooted in the traditions of indigenous peoples and early settlers in North America, particularly in regions where hunting was a way of life. The history of jellied moose nose dates back to the early 19th century, when people had to maximize their use of available resources. Moose were a vital source of food, and nothing went to waste. The preparation of jellied moose nose involved simmering the moose's nose, which is rich in connective tissue and cartilage, to extract the natural gelatin. This gelatin was crucial for giving the dish its characteristic jelly-like consistency. After simmering, the nose was removed, and the broth was allowed to cool and set. The result was a firm, savory jelly that could be sliced and served. The brutality of jellied moose nose lies in its preparation. Using the nose of the moose, an organ not typically eaten in modern times, involved a stark reminder of the harsh realities of survival. Number 13. Roast Swan. Roast swan was particularly popular among the English nobility from the medieval period through the 17th century. Swans, being elegant and majestic birds, were prized for their meat and often featured in elaborate feasts and banquets. The preparation of roast swan was not just about sustenance, but also about demonstrating wealth and status. Historically, swans were often reserved for royalty and the wealthy elite, partly due to their status as protected birds. The hunting and preparation of these birds were governed by strict regulations. In medieval England, it was illegal for commoners to hunt swans without permission from the crown. This control underscored the bird's symbolic and social importance. The preparation process for roast swan involved plucking, stuffing, and roasting the bird. The meat was considered a delicacy, with a rich and distinctive flavor that was highly valued in extravagant feasts. Swans were not only hunted, but were also subject to a preparation process that involved significant handling and cooking of the whole bird. The idea of roasting such a majestic creature might seem harsh, especially considering the ceremonial and often ostentatious nature of these meals. Today, roast swan is rarely seen on menus, largely due to conservation efforts and changing attitudes toward wildlife. We're just getting started here. Keep watching until the end, because some of the most brutal dishes are waiting for you there. Number 12. Stewed kidneys.
Show you how right now.
Stewed kidneys have a long history in British cuisine, where they have been enjoyed as a traditional dish for centuries. The preparation of stewed kidneys involves cooking the kidneys, which are rich in nutrients like iron and vitamin B12. Typically, the kidneys are cleaned, trimmed, and then stewed with ingredients such as onions, garlic, and herbs. This method of cooking was designed to tenderize the kidneys and enhance their flavor. Historically, kidneys were a common component of dishes in British cuisine, reflecting the broader use of offal in cooking. In the 18th and 19th centuries, stewed kidneys were featured in various cookbooks, such as Hannah Glass's The Art of Cookery, published in 1747. Which included recipes from various organ meats. The use of kidneys was not only practical, but also a proof to culinary resourcefulness during these times. The brutality of preparing stewed kidneys lies in the handling and cooking of organ meats, which can be quite graphic. The kidneys, often from lamb or beef, were meticulously cleaned and prepared. This method of cooking underscores the historical emphasis on utility and efficiency in food preparation. Number 11. Pigeon Pie. Pigeon pie was particularly popular in England from the medieval period through the 19th century. Pigeon meat was valued for its tenderness and flavor, and using it in pies was a way to create a hearty and elegant meal. Historically, pigeons were often raised specifically for their meat, known as squabs, and were considered a delicacy. The practice of making pigeon pie dates back to medieval times, with records showing that it was enjoyable by both the wealthy and common people. The 16th century English cookbook, The Good Housewife's Jewel, published in 1596, features a recipe for pigeon pie, highlighting its popularity among the elite. The cooking process involved plucking the feathers, cleaning the birds, and sometimes cooking them whole. This aspect of food preparation reflects a time when every part of the animal was utilized, and the process of making such dishes could be quite graphic and harsh by today's standards. In the 18th century, pigeon pie was often served at grand feasts and banquets, showcasing its status as a luxury dish. The dish's preparation involved a labor-intensive process, with birds sometimes being elaborately decorated and filled with rich, spiced pigeon meat. Number 10. Tripe. Tripe, which is the stomach lining of a cow, was a staple in many cultures. It became particularly popular in Europe during the medieval period, but it was valued for its ability to be preserved and cooked in various ways. Tripe was often boiled, a method that made it tender and easy to digest. In Britain, dishes like tripe and onions became common, with tripe being boiled and then served with onions and other seasonings. This preparation method was both affordable and effective, providing a hearty meal for families. Tripe's use case is also linked to its affordability. In the 19th century, tripe was a staple for the working class. It was inexpensive and widely available, making it an accessible source of nutrition. In fact, in the early 20th century, tripe consumption was so prevalent that it was often featured in public markets and street food stalls. The process of cleaning and cooking tripe is not for the faint-hearted. The stomach lining must be thoroughly cleaned to remove any residue and then boiled to soften it. The smell and appearance of raw tripe can be off-putting, and the preparation process is quite intensive compared to modern conveniences. Number 9. Lamb fry. Lamb's fry, also known as lamb liver, has been enjoyed since at least the 18th century. It became particularly popular in British cuisine, where liver and other organ meats were commonly used. In the 19th century, lamb's fry was a regular feature in both modest homes and more elaborate meals, thanks to its affordability and the nutritional benefits it offered. Lamb liver is rich in iron, vitamins A and B12, making it a valuable food source, especially during times when meat was a critical part of the diet. The brutality of lamb's fry lies in the handling and preparation of the liver. The liver must be thoroughly cleaned and prepared, often involving the removal of any membranes and blood vessels. This can be a graphic process, as the liver's texture and appearance might be unappealing to some. Additionally, the preparation of lamb's fry often involved butchering the animal, a practice that highlights the more direct and sometimes harsh realities of obtaining food in the past. Number 8. Soused pig's feet.
And I'm not putting any salt in this because I use the salted pig feet, so no.
Soused pig's feet, a dish made by pickling pig's totters in vinegar and spices, has a fascinating history. Originally, pig's feet were a practical choice for the poor in medieval Europe. This practice was born out of necessity, as pig's trotters, rich in collagen, were ideal for making filling and flavorful stews. In the 19th century, sousing became a popular preservation method. The acidic brine used not only extended the shelf life of the meat, but also enhanced its flavor. This technique allowed people to enjoy pig's feet even when fresh meat was scarce, especially in rural areas where refrigeration was unavailable. However, the production of pig's feet, like many other meat products, raises ethical concerns. Modern factory farming practices have often been criticized for their inhumane conditions. Pigs are typically kept in cramped spaces with limited movement, leading to stress and suffering. Reports from animal welfare organizations highlight issues such as inadequate living conditions and painful handling practices. In response, there has been a growing movement toward more humane farming practices, including better living conditions and more ethical slaughter methods. Now, folks, we are already halfway through the list, and there are still so many brutal dishes waiting for you to taste them or learn about their recipes and dark history. So before we continue, make sure to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button for more content like this. Number 7. Fish head stew.
Fish, and that fish will warm right up. We're gonna just finish it off with a little bit of cilantro.
Fish head stew, a dish made primarily from fish heads, has a rich history and offers a fascinating glimpse into traditional culinary practices. Historically, fish head stew has roots in many cultures. In Asia, especially in countries like China, Japan, and Thailand, fish head stew has been a common dish for centuries. For instance, in Chinese cuisine, dishes like fish head curry and yu tou tong, fish head soup, have been enjoyed for their depth of flavor and nutritional benefits. In Japan, kotsuyaki, a type of fish head stew, has been a traditional dish for over 1,000 years. The nutritional value of fish heads is notable. They are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, essential vitamins, and minerals. For example, a typical fish head provides around 12 grams of protein per 100 grams, along with significant amounts of vitamins A and D. This makes the stew not only flavorful, but also highly nutritious. The heads must be cleaned and simmered, a process that can seem off-putting to modern tastes. The process involves stripping away the skin and bones, often revealing the head's intricate and unappealing parts. Number 6. Stuffed dormice.
I'm coming out for this. Revenge of the Dormice. This one's big. It's got 18 teeth.
Stuffed dormice, a dish with roots in ancient Roman cuisine, stands at number 6 on our list. Dormice, small rodents known for their tender meat, were considered a delicacy in ancient Rome. They were often prepared by stuffing them with a mixture of meat, nuts, and spices, then roasting them to perfection. The history of stuffed dormice dates back to Roman times, around the 1st century AD. Archaeological findings and ancient texts reveal that dormice were a popular luxury food. Roman cookbooks like Apicius, De Coquilleria, include recipes for stuffed dormice, highlighting their status in Roman feasts. The dish was often served at banquets and special occasions, demonstrating the Romans' penchant for exotic and elaborate foods. First, the dormice were captured and then killed. The preparation required cleaning the animals, removing their fur, and stuffing them with a mixture of spiced meat, herbs, and nuts. This process was labor-intensive and not particularly appealing by modern standards. The dormice were then roasted, a method that showcased the intricate details of their preparation. Number 5. Roast hedgehog.
Since we've got the campfire going, how about...
Coming in the top 5, we have roast hedgehog, a dish which can be traced to the medieval period around the 12th century. During this time, hedgehogs were a common food source in Europe, where they were often cooked as a delicacy. Recipes from medieval cookbooks, such as The Form of Curry, mention how hedgehogs were seasoned, wrapped in clay, and roasted. This method was used to enhance the flavor and make the meat tender. To cook a hedgehog, it was often necessary to remove its spines, which could be a laborious and somewhat gruesome task. The animal's body would be cleaned, seasoned, and then roasted whole. The sight and preparation of a roasted hedgehog, with its distinctive spiked skin, could be quite off-putting to modern sensibilities. It reflects the lengths people once went in order to utilize available resources and create hearty, flavorful meals, offering a glimpse into the culinary practices of the past. Before we move forward, let me warn you that the dish at the top of our list can make you feel uneasy, as that is surely not for faint-hearted people, but for that, you have to stay tuned till the end. Number 4. Crickets. In many parts of Asia, such as Thailand, China, and Mexico, insects like crickets have been consumed for over 2,000 years. In these cultures, crickets are fried and seasoned to enhance their flavor, making them a crunchy, protein-rich snack. For example, in Thailand, crickets are often served as a popular street food, seasoned with spices, and enjoyed for their savory taste and nutritional benefits. Nutritionally, crickets are impressive. They are high in protein, with about 60% of their dry weight consisting of protein. Crickets also provide essential vitamins and minerals, including B vitamins, iron, and zinc. This makes them a valuable food source, particularly in regions where protein sources might be scarce. The process requires capturing the crickets, which are then cleaned and fried. This can be unsettling to those unaccustomed to eating insects. Additionally, the preparation can be quite graphic, as it involves dealing with the whole insect, including its legs and wings. And now, let's move on to our top 3 dishes. Number 3. Cockentrice.
A hog's head? Oh,
It's
God.
more than one animal.
It is, you're right, it's a spliced beast.
Well, this cockentrice, a dish from medieval England, was one of the most bizarre and extravagant foods of its time. It involved sewing the upper body part of a pig onto the lower half of a turkey, or capon, or vice versa. This strange creation was meant to be a stunning centerpiece at grand feasts, showing off the host's wealth and creativity. Historically, the cockentrice became popular in the 14th century. During this time, rich families loved showing off their food in elaborate and unusual ways. Recipes from the period describe how this dish was made to impress guests, often described in cookbooks with detailed instructions for preparing and assembling the dish. Making a cockentrice was quite a process. It required skillfully butchering and sewing together 2 different animals. First, the pig and bird were cooked separately, and then they were joined together to create the final dish. This involved a lot of work and a fair amount of graphic handling, as cooks had to deal with raw meat and the unsettling sight of a combined animal. The brutality of cockentrice preparation lies in the handling and sewing of the pig and bird. Seeing the pig's upper body attached to a bird's lower half might seem shocking and off-putting today. The sight of this dish would have been quite a spectacle at a medieval feast, but also a bit unsettling. Today, cockentrice is rarely seen on menus, reflecting how tastes have changed over the centuries. Number 2. Rats.
Ngon quá ơi.
Rats have been an unconventional food source for centuries, particularly during long sea voyages when sailors faced starvation and dwindling supplies. In the past, sailors on extended journeys had little choice but to eat rats when provisions ran out. Rats were abundant and could help clean up the food stores that might otherwise be contaminated. Historically, during the 16th and 17th centuries, sailors would often catch and eat rats out of necessity. These rodents were a source of protein when other food options were unavailable. According to the records from the time, rats were sometimes even preserved in barrels and eaten in dire circumstances. The harsh conditions and prolonged voyages made this practice a grim reality for many sailors. Handling and cooking rats, particularly the scavenger types common in ship environments, involved dealing with unsanitary conditions. Even when cooked, rats could carry diseases, making them a risky food choice. Sewer rats in particular were dangerous and carried diseases, like leptospirosis and hantavirus. Today, while some cultures still eat rats, the practice is less common in many parts of the world due to health concerns. Modern standards of hygiene and food safety have made the consumption of rats less acceptable, especially considering the risks associated with rodents from unsanitary environments. Despite their historical role in survival, rats are generally avoided in contemporary diets due to these health risks. Number 1. Boiled sheep's brain.
这是这个羊头啊，咱是鸡撒上。
And now comes the number one dish on our list. Boiled sheep's brain has a history that's both rich and unsettling. This dish has appeared in various cultures for centuries, reflecting a time when using every part of an animal was not just practical, but necessary for survival. But the way it's prepared reveals a brutal side of history. In ancient times, eating sheep's brain was common among many cultures. The Greeks and Romans enjoyed it as part of their cuisine, often adding it to stews or serving it at feasts. In the Middle Ages, European nobility considered sheep's brain a delicacy, often boiled or stewed or served with spices and herbs. The French, for example, included it in dishes like boudin blanc, a type of white pudding. However, the preparation of sheep's brain has a darker side. Traditionally, obtaining a sheep's brain involved methods that are shocking by today's standards. In many places, including historical Europe and parts of Asia and Africa, the sheep was killed in front of the food preparer and the brain was removed while the animal was still alive, leading to a horrific amount of suffering. Rumors about the preparation of sheep's brain sometimes describe a particularly brutal method. According to these accounts, the sheep was not killed outright, but instead was treated in a horrifying way. The process involved hitting the sheep on the head with a hammer to stun it, but not kill it. This was done to keep the animal alive while the brain was removed. Once the brain was obtained, it was boiled. The boiling process itself could be quite gruesome. The brain, often still covered in blood and tissue, was placed in a pot of hot water. This was not a quick process. It could take up to an hour for the brain to become tender. During boiling, the brain's texture changed to a soft, gelatinous consistency, and the smell was often overpowering. In terms of figures, a sheep's brain weighs about 200 to 300 grams and contains a large amount of cholesterol, over 100 milligrams in a single brain. This high cholesterol content, while nutritious, adds another layer of discomfort when considering the brutal process of obtaining and preparing it. The brutality extends beyond just the preparation. In many traditional practices, the killing of sheep was part of ritualistic ceremonies, which could involve extreme methods. While boiled sheep's brain has historical significance and was once considered a delicacy, its preparation involved cruel practices that are hard to ignore. The process, from the brutal killing of the animal to the extended boiling, highlights a dark aspect of culinary history and animal treatment that is deeply unsettling. And that's all we have for today's episode. If you want to see an even more brutal meal photo, click on the video to your right.